I get that many Valais citizens didn't like the estimated cost of the Sion 2026 Olympic bid, but I feel the Sion organizers forgot some information that could have saved their bid. Hey guys, Blood Moon Bobby here, and yes, after a couple weeks, I've come back to talk about Olympic related subjects. I know it's been a while, but my Olympic coverage is not going anywhere. I'm still going to cover the games going forward. Like I said before, after I started researching the Olympics, it kind of rejuvenated my interest in the games. I watched them as a kid, pretty much from Beijing onwards. I did watch Salt Lake City and the Athens Olympics, but didn't really get to see Torino. Beijing is really when I started watching it consistently. And very recently, I started getting into research, so I wanted to cover more games, including future games, both planned and ones that are still in the bidding process. And there's one casualty that has hit the 2026 Olympic plans, and that is that Sion, Switzerland has basically the government of the province that Sion is in, the I have the name here, the southern canton of Valais, if I'm pronouncing that right. I'll have the names in the video just so, just to make sure I'm pronouncing them right. But yeah, the canton of Valais, 54% of voting citizens have voted that they do not want to support funding the Sion Olympics, and as a result, the government, basically the canton's government rejected granting 100 million francs toward that would go to funding the games. 100 million Swiss francs, by the way, is around $100 million. So, yep. So that's it. Sion has dropped out, and the IOC said that Switzerland will not pick a substitute city. And why, you may ask? Why did they decide to not why has Valais has basically said no, we don't want the Sion Olympics to happen, and the IOC suspects it is due to the lack of current information. They have a statement here that says, quote, "From the polls, we understand that outdated information on the cost of the games was the main concern for those voting against the funding. And the Sion bid was estimated to cost about $2 billion, which, that's even a fraction compared to how much the recent Pyeongchang Winter Olympics costed, which was around $13 billion. But as Business Insider says, every Olympic Games in the last 50 years has gone over budget, in whether slightly over budget or way, way, way over budget. And I feel even though more recent games like London 2012 and Pyeongchang 2018 and Rio 2016, even though it has its white elephants, even though those were relative successes and didn't cost nearly as much as the more expensive games, I feel a lot of really skeptical cities are really nervous that if they host the Olympics, it's going to result in yet another Beijing 2008 or Sochi 2014, which Beijing cost around $44 billion and Sochi costed $51 billion, which I personally think that, at least on paper, the IOC has had policies for preventing another really expensive games to at least go that far, with things like Agenda 2020, where they're basically saying we want to pick cities that already have a majority of venues, which that's why they picked places like Tokyo to host in 2020, because I would say about 3/4 of their venues are already existing, or they're temporary venues. But among other issues, the Tokyo bid, well, not bid, they are going to host in 2020, is going over budget for other reasons. But that's another topic for video. But so I wanted to focus specifically on why the Sion bid for 2026 failed. And in my opinion, it's a lack of communication. I know Rewire sports journalist Alan Abramson, who basically helped me start to cover Olympic-related topics. He says it's a lack of communication in the budget, and that there's really two separate budgets for hosting the Olympics, one for the organizing committee and one for basically setting up the transportation, which I'll link his article below if you want to check that out. But I think a really big thing, as I was saying with Olympic Agenda 2020, where they basically want to have many of the venues built, and also now as of recently, bid cities can now spread out the Olympics as much as they want, which I'll get to in a second with Italy's bid. But I think the really big problem with Sion's was they weren't very clear what venues would host each event. You know, you gotta understand, even with something like Paris 2024 and LA 2028, when they presented the bids at the IOC session back in, I think it was 2017 in Lima, Peru, you know, they had videos ready to go and documents saying, you know, okay, for Paris, we're going to host it in these specific, you know, venues. And for LA, we're going to host it in these venues, you know, like we're going to hold weightlifting in the Microsoft Theater. We're going to hold basketball in the Staples Center. We're going to hold athletics in the LA Coliseum and so forth. And I really should move my laptop out of the way so my camera doesn't shake that much. But yeah, whereas with Sion's bid, if you go to their website, which you still can, I'll have it below in the description as one of my sources, they just basically tell you we're going to hold it in each of these cities, but they don't really say what venues it will be held in. You know, like I'll give you an example here. Like, for example, they say that hockey was going to be held in one of the cities that would hold hockey was the city of Bern. And for when I did the research for this video, I had to do a lot of guessing in terms of like the map shows what cities it would be held in, but I had to do a lot of guessing in terms of the venues that are nearby, either venues that can host the events or venues that are have hosted the past Olympic Games, because Switzerland has hosted the Winter Games in San Moritz in 1928 and 1948. And in fact, San Moritz was supposed to host, according to the Sion 2026 bid, it would host basically luge, skeleton, and bobsled, but it didn't specifically say where. Now, in the research for this video, I did look up that the luge course that they used for the 1948 Winter Olympics is still, at least in relative operation. I believe it's refrigerated, but it does sound like it can be repurposed, but they didn't say for the in the Sion bid that if it would be it. And for Bern, it would host hockey. There is a arena that a local hockey team uses called the, I'm not joking here, the Post Finance Arena in Bern. But again, the document didn't say if it would be hosted there. It just said it would be hosted in Bern. Interestingly enough, I did come across a news story that suggested that speed skating could be held in the Netherlands, which is hundreds of miles away. I was kind of thinking, why didn't they pick a venue in France? But that was one of the options. In the map, it said that short track and speed skating and figure skating were going to be held in Lausanne. I've watched the video on Lausanne's 2020 Youth Olympics video, and I'm still having trouble pronouncing it. But you know, I did look up on the Olympic website that for Lausanne they were going to build a new venue for short track and figure skating. So I'm guessing they would have used that same venue. Interestingly enough, even though Lausanne has been chosen to host the 2020 Youth Olympics, they didn't decide on a venue yet, or what it's going to be called. So I'm guessing Lausanne 2020 may have its own issues. But yeah, what else was there? There was a lot of other really vague news. There were supposed Crans, Montana, and Verbier were supposed to host alpine skiing and cross-country skiing specifically. And I did look up that it does seem like people do skiing in those two cities, but again, nothing too specific. So that's why I was saying it was very tough to research this video, and this the news that Sion dropped out was actually announced on, it says June 10th here, but I think it was on June 3rd. I mean, the reason why it took so long for this video to come out was because it was very hard to research, because they listed the name of the city. I'm going to sound like a broken record. They listed the names of the cities, but not the venues. So I'm basically just picking out if there was a venue nearby, if it would hold it. Laysin was to hold snowboarding, and if you go look up Laysin snowboarding, you do find that people do snowboard there. So, I mean, I really think that was the thing that scared off a lot of voters in not just Sion but in Valais, is just that they said that they were hosted in these cities, but they didn't really give specifics as to where they would host. I'll have links to Paris 2024's bid that basically said, hey, we're going to host, and they were very specific. They listed the names of venues. It did say that Stade de France would host the athletics and the opening ceremony, but it listed pretty much everything. Like, I think it was all the information was pretty much finalized. But it's just, I really think that's just the thing that killed Sion's chances to host the games. I mean, even if you go look up like Calgary 2026, even though it's kind of rusty, like the process for Calgary, they did say there were plans to revitalize the MacMahon Stadium, which hosted the opening ceremony of the 1988 Winter Olympics in Calgary. But even though the preparations for MacMahon Stadium are kind of on shaky ground, they did at least say, hey, we have some kind of a plan. So I think that's just ultimately what killed Sion's chances, and I think it would have been a shame, because if Sion had picked more specific, if they were much more specific in their bid, I think they could have had a really successful Olympics. Because I'm not really a fan of how, I know for Calgary, the Calgary, Italy, and the Sapporo bids, they were really going to spread them out. I heard that for Calgary, they were going to reuse some of the venues Whistler used for the Vancouver 2010 games. For Italy, they're spreading it out to Torino, Milan, and Cortina, and that's literally hundreds of kilometers. And I heard for Sapporo, they wanted to also get Nagano involved, since Nagano hosted the 1998 Winter Olympics, and it's just, at least with Sion, and I'll have a link to the map in my sources list, they were still relatively close knit. I mean, it's spread out, relatively spread out around Switzerland, but I felt it could have been a more realistic idea of spreading out the venues, because some of these places like Bern and St. Moritz, they have venues ready to go, or that could be potentially repurposed. It's just that for the organizers for the Sion bid weren't very clear. So where does the 2026 Winter Olympics go from here? There are currently 6 cities in the running still. I mentioned some of them. I'll go through them all again. So the remaining competitors are Sapporo, Japan, Ezurum, Turkey, if I'm pronouncing that right, Calgary, Canada, Graz, Austria, which is near where Arnold Schwarzenegger was born, Stockholm, Sweden, which also hosted the 1912 Summer Olympics, and like I said, Torino, Milan, and Cortina d'Ampezzo are basically doing a joint bid for the 2026 games. So it's really hard to say, especially with how IOC President Thomas Bach, he said that he wants the 2026 Olympics to come back to a more traditional place. And what is a more traditional place? Traditional place, according to journalists, is basically North America or Europe. So, basically, continents that hosted most Olympic Games of the past. So what I'm getting out of this is, even though Sapporo could be a potential candidate, especially since Japan is hosting the 2020 Tokyo Games, there's a fair chance that Sapporo could be thrown out the list, especially since I read a story that basically said that there is this transportation system that won't be ready in time for 2026. So it's hard to say. Calgary, I think I've heard preparations are starting to get back in shape, even though it was kind of rusty. Because when I first did the research for the Calgary bid, there were concerns of things getting ready in time, and it was kind of uncertain. But it does sound like things are looking up now. And yeah, I just feel like, especially with Agenda 2020 in mind, I think there's a decent chance that the Italian bid, it may have the best shot, especially since Torino hosted the Olympics. I know Torino lost money, but the fact is they still got, many of their venues in shape. Most notably, Stadio Olimpico is still around. Like, I saw pictures of it being used as a soccer stadium or football stadium. And then of course, 2026, it'll be the 20th anniversary of the Torino Olympics, and it will be the 70th anniversary of the Cortina d'Ampezzo Winter Olympics. Interestingly enough, I did do some research on Cortina's venues back in '56, and many of the venues are, like, their luge track is no longer being used, and some of their venues are it's kind of hard to pinpoint if they're ready. I think Cortina's Olympic Stadium is still it still exists, but I don't know if it'll be able to host as many people, because nowadays, even though Pyeongchang's Olympic Stadium could hold about 30,000 people, I would imagine the IOC would prefer if an Olympic Stadium could host like 70,000 people or 80,000 people, like the London Olympic Stadium. So they'll probably this is probably why they decided to cross bid it, like, with Torino and I don't know about Milan, but definitely Torino, since it was a much more recent Olympic host. But that's just kind of my take on it. Me personally, I think it would be cool if the Olympics came back to Italy. Jesus Christ, 2026, it'll be the third time Italy hosts the Winter Olympics. So I honestly think, especially with Agenda 2020 and how the IOC wants to be able to use as many existing venues as possible, I'd have to imagine Italy would be the most likely candidate. The only question is they're not going to want to lose money this time. Nobody wants to lose money, and no country wants to go in debt. So, I mean, the last thing a country wants is to have another Montreal 1976, where the city literally spent 30 years paying off, the taxpayers spent 30 years to pay off how expensive those games were, the Montreal games were. So, alright guys, this has been Blood Moon Bobby, and please let me know, are you sad that Sion is not going to host? Do you want Switzerland to host another Winter Olympic Games? Do you think it's still possible? Please let me know your thoughts. Do you think any of the 6 hosts I mentioned should host the 2026 Olympics? Please leave your thoughts below. If you have any other Olympic stories, I'm down to cover either the Summer or Winter Olympics. Please either leave a comment, or you can email me with my email address down below in the description. So thank you guys for watching. I will see you all later. Hey guys, this has been a Blood Moon Bobby video. Please like this video or dislike it, and please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.